Kristina Moriconi is a poet and essayist whose work has appeared in a variety of literary journals and magazines, including Brevity, The Raven's Perch, The Nervous Breakdown, Lumina, Ruminate Magazine, and Literary Mama, as well as many others. Moriconi earned her MFA from the Rainier Writing Workshops in Tacoma, Washington. She teaches in the Creative Writing MFA program at Rosemont College, and she is a finalist for the Kurt Johnson Prose Awards for Creative Nonfiction from December Magazine. Please welcome Kristina Moriconi.
Suppose I told you the story is mostly about sadness. There are bones and birds, but really it is about my missing a man who built train cars and dollhouses and stone walls. A man who shot jackrabbits and armadillos and traded them for cigarettes during the war. A man who read Louis L'Amour westerns, who jiggled pocket change, who let me sip Sambuca when I was 12. What I write begins as an excavation, a systematic digging, recording, a want to know more. Analysis, the process of studying and classifying artifacts. Artifact, an object made, modified, or used by people. You see where I'm going with this, working from the known to the unknown, from the top to the bottom. I move into the house on the corner where I once stood, decades before, waiting for the school bus. My first spring in this house, in the garden, I wait as green pushes its way through the soil. Grow, I whisper, bloom. I want to know everything that remains, what is hidden, what has been left behind. The family of 6 who lived here before had moved out in a hurry. Already, inside, I've unearthed a wedding gown in the basement. Outside, tightly wrapped buds fringe the branches of winter's brown. I anticipate the shock of color, each surprise, each shade unveiling itself as part of a larger plan. What ended suddenly here will soon be eclipsed by the story of what carries on. Roots will take hold, keep new soil from washing away. I dig holes deep in the freshly tilled earth, plant juniper and chokeberry, hibiscus and big blue. Along the new fence, I pile artifacts exhumed from the ground, objects from another life, small bits of a family now extinct. 4 baseballs I imagine being thrown by a father before he left, before weather frayed the seams, exposing layers of string wound around a cork center underneath. 3 disembodied plastic arms of action figures. Somewhere, Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, abandoned, each without an arm, and perhaps a boy who has tossed what remains of his heroes into a toy box, never to play with them again. 2 glass marbles, crystal blue cat's eyes. 1 plastic egg, still waiting to be found, hidden once by a mother or a father in a crumbling stone wall before something cracked it open, took what had been tucked inside. Context, the relationship of artifacts and other cultural remains to each other and the situation in which they are found. A crumbling wall is a context. Along the sloped garden in the backyard of this house, part of the wall has collapsed. Other parts are beginning to buckle and give way. What had been there is covered in moss and lichen, entire worlds of green, root structures, leaves, stems, rosette patterns spreading across rocks of schist. I will shore it up, rebuild it, try not to disturb what is already there. But as I lift rocks, move them around, mice and chipmunks scatter. Hawks swoop down, snatch them from the grass. As I stack one rock on top of another, stagger and restructure, I am reminded of childhood days spent leaping from the wall in my grandparents' backyard, a wall my grandfather built with stones he'd selected and hauled straight from the quarry near his house, a self-taught stonemason. I collect data, interpret, try to reconstruct a life out of memory and stone. I suppose there is sadness in this process, this reconstruction. Perhaps this is my only truth. Consider how abstract truth can seem until you find something tangible to hold on to. In dry stone wall construction, foundation stones are the largest in the wall and may be partly or entirely below ground. Through stones extend from one side to the other, connecting the two faces. The top stones are called the cope. As a child, the wall in my grandparents' backyard seems like a high, perilous ledge, one I jump from to challenge my fears, to dare myself to fly, to land farther and farther each time. With my cousins, in elaborate games of survival and search and rescue, we hide things behind the loose rocks in the wall. We hide notes and coins and pocket knives. We hide slingshots, stockpile small rocks as ammunition. We hide marbles and matchbooks, the body of a dead bird we find in the backyard. This bird becomes our secret. We watch with odd fascination the time lapse of its decay. Small pieces of grit in its gut, the neck snapped, its head resting on a few splayed feathers left on one wing, its mandible hinged open, something hooked in the throat, something else in the V-shaped breech of its beak. One black onyx eye remains, the other already plucked from its orbital ring. Before this bird becomes ours to study, its keeled sternum, cracked wishbone, its crooked feet. Excavation involves the recovery of several different types of data from a site. A decomposing bird is an eco-fact. I suppose there is sadness in this process, this decomposition, but we look at it with wonder, with childhood curiosity. The same way we look at the canned goods stacked on the shelves of our grandparents' pantry in their basement, hundreds of cans of vegetables and fruit, as though there might be a dire shortage of food any day. The same way we sneak into the heater room, too, to stare at the skins of rattlesnakes our grandfather keeps there hanging on the walls. The same way we hide behind the bar our grandfather built, studying his collection of vintage liquor bottles, empty, sticky bottles shaped like pirates and soldiers, birds, and sexy women in bikinis. These, he tells us, had come from his years down south, driving trucks filled with alcohol and tobacco. This assemblage, these artifacts found together in situ in the original place. Years later, I visit my grandparents' house with my own children. Holding onto my hand, they walk along the stone wall. They are too young to jump, but I tell them my stories of flying. The wall seems so much lower to me now, so much less intimidating. One Sunday, I stopped by on my way to Sears to have my daughter's first professional pictures taken. My grandfather is in the kitchen. Not long after we arrive, he begins coughing. Fast, it becomes uncontrollable, almost choking, until blood rushes from his mouth out onto the floor, drips down onto his white t-shirt. I freeze for a few seconds. Then I remember my daughters are seeing this. I hurry them into the other room with my grandmother before returning to the kitchen. My grandfather stands at the sink, still coughing up blood, so red against the white porcelain. I call 911. I know then I will write about this someday, about the bright red of his blood, about his lungs and how they are filled with cancer, and how, because he smoked cigarettes for years, the diagnosis of asbestosis is complicated, inconclusive, but I know. Consider how uncertain knowing can seem until you find something tangible to hold on to. Proof, evidence. In those train cars he helped to build, asbestos insulated almost everything. He handled it, inhaled it, and the fibers had penetrated deep into his lungs. Later that day, my daughters still in their fancy dresses, I take them to Sears to have their picture taken. They both smile. A photograph is a context. It will always remind me, I know. I am there when he takes his last breath. In those final moments, he pleads with me to finish roofing and painting and decorating the dollhouse he built for me years before, the one sitting near his workbench in the basement. He apologizes for not finishing it, but he wants me to pass it on to my own daughters. An unfinished dollhouse is a use-related context, resulting from abandonment of materials during its construction. As I rebuild the wall in my backyard, I hear the sound of my grandfather's voice, 1 stone over 2, 2 stones over 1. In between the face stones, I tuck the hearting, small stones that fill in the gaps, that make the wall structurally sound. I heart the wall tightly as I go. I miss the man who taught me, who would point to the wall he built in his backyard and name the stones, who'd show me the layers of mica and graphite in the sparkling rocks of schist, from the Greek meaning to split. I till the soil around this new wall, plan a new garden. The earth, loosened, yields a skeleton key, a small plastic hand, shards of a blue and white spode plate, and just a few feet away, the body of a bird, lifeless, fresh, its feathers still untouched. The only damage so far, the hollowed socket of one eye. I study the pattern of color, a purple finch resting in my cupped palm. We are burial places, Leonardo da Vinci writes. Suppose I told you this is the exact moment I begin piecing together my own words, feeling the weight of sadness, spinning this into story, all of it. Because there is no escaping this life. You see how I'd been captivated early on by the shiny surfaces of plastic bits, their bright colors, by the taint of time on baseballs and birds, by the comforting smell of earth and everything once buried it is willing to relinquish. How I want, no, need, to collect and chronicle these remnants of the past, tell the story of how they reveal themselves, how they resurrect the dead.